have any questions, that would be their opportunity.
Good. With no other changes, is there a motion to approve the minutes from the June 18th meeting?
I move we approve the minutes from the June 18th, 2009 meeting.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the June 18th, 2009 meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard, motion carries. Item number 2, consider an amendment to Georgetown Villas PDD 08-3 to increase the maximum allowable lot coverage from 40% to 45% on 15 townhome lots in the development. The request area is located between Fairdale Road and Georgetown Road north of Crawford Street, but does not include Tract 1 or Tract 2 of the Georgetown Village PDD and does not include Lot 9, Block 1, a commercial lot. Dean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the short summary is back at the end of last year when these items were being reviewed and the proposal to convert this to a townhome development, drawings that were developed by the engineer depicting the location of the units and utilities and paving and all that showed units that were covering anywhere from 35 to 39% of the lot. And so the maximum in the R2 district is 35%. So when the Planning Commission reviewed this at our recommendation, there were 4 exceptions that were requested and granted, and one was to reduce the lot depth from 100 feet to 85, to reduce the minimum front yard from 25 to 20, minimum rear yard from 25 to 15, and then allow lot coverage of up to 40%. But what we ran into when the detailed footprints of the townhome units came in is that they grew. The lots did not change in their configuration, but when you included covered porches and the recessed covered deck, there were 9 out of the 15 footprints that covered more than 40% of the building lot. And so as staff, since an exception was already granted to go from 35 to 40, we didn't see where we had the discretion to make that change. So it was brought back to you because that number not only was a recommendation, but it was incorporated into the ordinance that rezoned this property. I think we knew all along this is a tight site in terms of getting the rows of townhomes in there, basically to get 4 rows and streets and setbacks into that area. And we think that now that the townhome floor plans have been developed, we've got a pretty good handle on what our coverages are going to be, not and for every single unit in the development. So it got bumpy as the first ones were proposed to be built, but we think with this amendment, if it's approved, then that will smooth it out as the build out continues. But we think that and I think we noted on page 4 that this development is unique compared to others just because of the depth that we're working with. This does, anytime you reduce lot area, you're going to have higher coverages. We think the impacts are not going to be external, but will be primarily internal within the development. It's a if there was a modification required to change all the floor plans and everything now, that would create a hardship at this stage of the project, and we're not adjusting any setback limitations. We're just really, with the fleshed out floor plans, getting a truer handle on how much is going to be actually covered. And so we put in your packet a vicinity map, and then there was a drawing there which is very difficult to read that maybe John has on the screen. It's maybe 2. This is what was reviewed by you, and if you blow those up, almost every one of those was under 40%. And so I think it was showing building areas of 2,800 some square feet on lots to the south, and those ended up when you count everything, at being 3,376 square feet. So this, we think, is somewhat of a cleanup item, but one that needs to be done because the exception that was granted was only to go up to 40%, and that's not going to be adequate to accommodate these townhome footprints. So with that, I think we're open to any questions that you have. But again, if you make a favorable recommendation on that, then this will go to the City Commission and they will amend the ordinance that had the specifications and development limitations for this property.
In my, just so I can get my hands around this a little better, so really nothing that we approved before has changed. It was just the method of measurement then of the percentage of the lot coverage?
I'd have to really look at the dimensions, but if you want to go back to 2 again, John. I can't say for certainty that maybe the depths on those, or at least on the front portion, as far as having, if you want to go maybe to 3, John, or is 4 the other? It'd probably be 4. I think that the depth, at least as far as coming out to the front, may have increased, and then you've got this area. If anything, if you look at the previous plan, this was just a square box, but some of the initial calculations, there's actually a roof that extends over this as a covered deck. These are porches, but I think it had to do with this depth right there as far as the difference between the 2,800 and the 3,300 square feet, because the footprints still, these footprints still fit within the 2015 and the side yard setbacks. So I think it is primarily an issue of the depth of those units.
We have 2 final development plans.
Yes.
So is this the final development plan?
This one here is what's proposed to actually be built. This one was, the first one, what John has up there as 2, was what was submitted to you for review, as far as that's what we based our determination that more than 35 but less than 40% of these lots were going to be covered by townhomes. Because we went back and looked at that and said, well, how could we have missed that when we did all of that review? Well, the way we missed it was because every one of those, at least as was shown conceptually there, was under 40%.
Under the lot coverage notes, what is the lot coverage for lot 9?
Don't know that yet because it's a blank slate and it's not going to be residential.
Yes, I don't
Okay.
think that's part of our...
Oh, that's, okay.
That is-
With the new numbering, that's what
Right.
threw me. Okay.
So, yes, the lot numbering changed from that earlier version.
Were the
Also-
neighbors on the north notified about this?
Yes, this was a public hearing
Okay.
item, and
Because they expressed concern the first time with the tight,
yeah, I think they were concerned about what the distance was and the setback at this
yes.
area here, and that's not changing. I'd really have to, because we have all these reduced drawings, I'd really have to, but what I'm thinking is that the depth from here to here is slightly greater on these final floor plans than they were on the concept that was submitted by Campbell and Johnson engineers.
It's hard to know what, from, say, 39% to 43%. Is that a foot bigger? Is that a, I don't know.
Well,
I'm trying
the way I looked at it, this unit right here is 3,376 square feet. That's how much of this lot is covered by rooftop and that's between 43 and 44%. On the earlier plan, the footprint was 2,800 square feet and the lot coverage was 38%. So you've increased the footprint by about 500 square feet,
Okay.
and that's resulted in a 5% increase in the amount of lot that's covered. The lots, the configuration, none of that has changed. It's primarily just that as the floor plan fleshed out, the square footage was developed in greater detail than what was done by the engineers at the original outset.
Dean, this may or may not be a factor, but when you get that close to the maximum, or even if it's increased to 45, I would be making the assumption then that outbuildings such as a small storage facility would not be allowed then because you wouldn't have any space to do it. Is that correct?
There's really no space to do it on this site, and that was one of the things we discussed and was a condition as far as external covered porches, so, or decks. So that is the plan that the applicant came up with, was to incorporate the porches in here so there's an inset and they're incorporated into the overhang, because this is all utility easement back here. There's electric lines and boxes. There wouldn't be any place here to put any kind of accessory outbuilding.
And I noticed when you reviewed what our actions were in October, and maybe it just isn't in this information, but there's no mention of our stipulation for the sidewalk. I'm sure that was recorded. This was the zoning action that was part of Okay.
the plat.
Got it.
And
Yeah.
I said, I haven't been up there, but my understanding it was built up front as part of the street project, and so there should be a sidewalk on the west side of Georgetown Road right now.
I'm only seeing the back of it on Fairdale.
So I understood that the sidewalk was built as part of the street project, and so the section here of public sidewalk should be in already.
Okay.
Any further questions of staff? If none, would the applicant care to address the commission?
Kelly Dan, 3059 Quail Creek Lane. As far as the footprint goes, we really didn't change anything on the footprint from the plans. When we submitted this to the engineers, we gave them we went with a 50 foot by 70 foot footprint, and we didn't change anything outside. Just basically we didn't have a plan drawn yet, so what the extra percentage is coming is just the porch areas that we added in between the garages there, and so there's really nothing. It's no wider and it's no deeper than it was before when we originally did it. Just kind of we didn't have the porches or nothing like that in the drawings. We didn't have a plan drawn up yet. We were just going with the basic footprint, and we stayed within the footprint of what we originally were going to do. So if you got any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there any member of the public that would care to address the commission?
We did send notice to everybody who had the original notice on this item.
Did we have any written responses?
We did not receive any comments or responses in response to that mailing, no.
Well, we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion and action.
Well, I think we knew it was going to be kind of a unique piece of property anyway. I think the plot looks pretty good given its constraints, and it'll be nice to see the infill. So I'd move that we approve PDD 08-3 And I don't think there was any staff recommendations on there, was there?
No, our recommendation was if you were favorable towards the request, that you would just increase the allowable lot coverage from 40 to 45%.
There you go. Okay, allowing that lot coverage then from 40 to 45%.
I second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Appear ready to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Application P09-4A filed by Todd Welch requesting approval of final plat of Welch addition to a proposed subdivision containing 19 residential lots and 1 commercial lot. Subject property is a 10.97 acre tract located on the west side of Holmes Road between Crawford Street and Brookwood Lane extended. Dean?
I noticed that we didn't attach the letter summarizing your June 16th approval, but we were on a fast running track from June 16th to the 7th to look at final plat approval of this tract, and then we had a meeting with Mr. Welsh and with Darvin Dent, who represents Landmark Development, the property across the street. They have retained the same design engineer, and as we had meetings and discussions with them, and they were in the same room, they realized how married together they were in terms of timing and design and layout and coordinating construction of Holmes Road, and particularly the sewer connection for this proposed Welsh addition has to go through the Wheatland Hills addition to get over to the interceptor, which is over in here. And so there were a couple different routes. One was a more northerly route, one was this route, and when that gets built, which location it gets built is going to influence Darvin Dent's phasing as far as what area he starts first. So they realized that they had a little more discussion and coordination to do on that to make sure their designs dovetailed. So the status is now that Landmark Development here, they have had a preliminary plat recommended for approval by you. Mr. Welsh has had a preliminary plat recommended for approval by you, as well as zoning changes. The City Commission has recommended approval of a zoning change here and here, subject to final platting. And so, again, we had sent notice out to the abutting owners of this hearing date, and the applicant then, after that meeting, said that he wanted to postpone consideration until he could track together with Wheatland Hills addition. So I think the appropriate action would be to see if anybody is here, doesn't look like, in response to the notice that went out, and then we would recommend that consideration of this item be postponed until cost estimates and a final plat of Wheatland Hills across the street are ready for review. So I guess the way we would see this working out is that when that comes together, those two plats on either side of Holmes Road would be looked at by you at the same time. And so, again, our recommendation would be to postpone this and to link it up with Wheatland Hills and have them come together.
Very good. Is there a motion to postpone this?
I'd make that motion that we postpone until the two are brought back together.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to postpone application P09-4 until a future date. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard, motion carries. Other matters?
Yes, we will have a meeting on July 21st. I think Mr. Funk will be back by then. I think he's in Canada right now. And for that meeting, we have hopefully the school district's final plat layout for the Central High campus. And also, we had a request that was made by Big Nose Kate's to alter the conditions on the use of their outdoor balcony. We also have another drinking establishment in the downtown area that has a balcony with similar restrictions, and that owner has requested that their conditions of approval be altered as well, and that is Doc Holidays, which is at the location of 5th and Iron in the Phoenix complex there. And then the third item we have is discussion of hot dog carts, and we have we have a hot dog cart set up out at Lowe's, and our ordinance is set up such that it allows for what we would call mobile vendors to set up for a weekend special event, or Dillon's is going to give away hot dogs on a weekend or sell them for $1, or somebody has a barbecue cooker that they set up for a 3-day weekend, then they move on to a different location. The request there at Lowe's is to set something up on a more long-term basis. So because we limit the amount of time a mobile vendor can be in one place, we'll have some discussion about mobile vendors and mobile food vendors at that meeting. And then we would, I think we're going to try, we've got a couple things lined up. We'll start with that one and try to maybe get started at 3 o'clock that day for a study session, but we'll give you more information on that. The other thing I think we may want to look at is our first meeting in August. We've had for some time now, we've discussed the fact that they're remapping the city as far as floodplain and floodplain mapping, and we did want to schedule a study session on that just to give you an idea of changes and how that might impact people. And we'll be scheduling a number of public meetings with property owners who might be affected by the new maps, and you might get calls or contact from people about the maps. So we wanted to have an educational session with you. It does impact development. It also impacts people who have existing mortgages, and there are a number of things. So I think either the first or second meeting in August, we'll try to set up something to talk about floodplain mapping. But that's what we have lined up for right now.
Is there a time frame that we have to have this floodplain revised map in place by?
What we anticipate happening is that they had a meeting out here where they were going to more or less set the groundwork for releasing for public comment the maps. And then we gave them a bunch of homework items which they have been working on, and they want to have resolved before. We've had within the city of Salina somewhere between 1,300 and 1,400 individual map changes, flood map changes on properties. Well, what they're supposed to do as the new map rolls out is be able to tell somebody, and the realtor and the banker and the appraiser, well, yeah, you have this letter of map amendment on your property that you got in 1990. Is it still going to be good under this new map? And so school district has properties that are affected, residential properties are affected, some commercial properties are affected, and it boils down primarily to flood insurance, which a buyer wants to know if flood insurance is going to be part of a mortgage or not. The other part is regulatory, that if you have a property that's in the floodplain, you generally can't have a basement, so it impacts residential construction from that standpoint. So when they publicly announce the release of the maps, the city will have 90 days to put together public comments, questions, concerns, and that's the real estate community, that's individual homeowners, that's people like USD 305 that own variety of properties that have questions about particular ones. So we'll have 90 days to put together that information. And also, I mean, if you think about 13, let's say 1,300 individual homeowners who have a question about whether their letter of map amendment is still going to be good or not, and if they release the maps and they can't answer that question, that's not good for anybody. So we did the preliminary review, and we found that about 60% of the LOMAs that had been done in Salina, they had a record of. And we said, what about the other 40%? And they said, oh. And so they've been working on the O part.
I want to make sure she's got my number. It's 51311. My current phone number, 825-1311.
Time and temperature.
But no, I mean,
1,300 phone calls later, yeah.
but that, I mean, if you look at it from the standpoint that you're a realtor and you have a listing, and you've got the existing map, then you have the new map. Well, I'm going to buy this house based on the existing map, but 2 years from now we might have a new map. What does that mean? Well, there's just a lot of people to educate about what all that means, and that's insurance agencies, lenders, real estate people, appraisers, not to mention people who own property. So that's what that 90 days is here's the proposed maps, here's what it potentially means for you, and I've got this individual question, and so we'll probably try to have some public forums that way. Probably not in front of the Planning Commission, but probably elsewhere. But we do want you to be aware of that, so you can, you know the community pretty well. You can, if you're skeptical about why an area is included in, we want to hear that. So.
Very good. Well, if there's no other business, we are adjourned. 30 minutes.
Speedy meeting.
I said 12.
Yeah, I wonder when you started to write that down.